Before we dive into our story, I'd like to welcome all listeners to Woo English, where you can learn English through captivating stories. Our tales are crafted with clear and simple sentences to make learning both effective and enjoyable. If you find this story helpful, please show us some support by pressing the like button. It really helps us out. Remember, the purpose of our stories is educational. We aim to enlighten and entertain, not to glorify the characters. Your comments and feedback are highly encouraged, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts with us. Now, let's get started with our story and embark on a journey of discovery and learning. Chapter 1. Early Life in Scotland. In the lush green landscape of Scotland, where the rolling hills meet the cold, misty mornings, young Alexander Fleming was born into a world of simplicity and nature. It was 1881, in a small farming village called Lockfield, where his story began. The Fleming family lived in a modest stone farmhouse, surrounded by vast fields and the endless sky, an idyllic yet harsh environment that shaped young Alexander from the outset. Alexander was the third of 4 children born to Hugh Fleming, a farmer who had lost his first wife. His mother, Grace Morton, was a strong and caring woman, dedicated to her children and their small, tightly knit community. Life on the farm was not easy. It demanded hard work and resilience, qualities that Alexander learned early on. His days were filled with chores from dawn till dusk, helping his family tend the sheep and cows, and working the fields during the harvest seasons. Despite the demands of farm life, Alexander's childhood was filled with the joys of rural existence. He and his siblings would play in the fields, their laughter echoing across the open spaces. They explored the nearby woods and streams, their curious minds learning about the world around them through direct experience. These early adventures sparked Alexander's lifelong interest in the natural world, an interest that would one day lead him to monumental discoveries. Education for the Fleming children was rudimentary, provided by their mother at home until they were old enough to attend the small local school. The schoolhouse was a humble one-room building, attended by children of various ages from all around the district. Here, Alexander proved to be an attentive and thoughtful student, often lost in thought or scribbling notes in his small, worn-out notebook. Alexander's teacher, Mr. Douglas, was a stern but fair man who saw potential in the quiet, observant boy. He encouraged Alexander's curiosity, especially in reading. The school had few books, but Alexander read each one with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. His favorites were stories of great scientists and explorers, their tales of discovery and adventure fueling his imagination and dreams. Life at home, however, was not without its challenges. The death of his father when Alexander was just 7 years old marked a turning point in his young life. The responsibility of the farm fell to his elder brothers, and the family struggled to make ends meet. These were years of hardship, but also of growth and strengthening family bonds. Alexander learned the value of perseverance and hard work, watching his mother and brothers strive to keep the farm afloat. During these formative years, Alexander developed a keen sense of observation, a trait that would become fundamental in his later scientific work. He noticed patterns in nature, the way diseases affected their livestock, or how the changing seasons influenced the crops. These observations were stored away in his young mind, forming the early foundation of his scientific approach. Community was another pillar of Alexander's upbringing. The Flemings were well known and respected in their village. Alexander grew up surrounded by stories of community aid, where neighbors would gather to help each other during harvests or sickness. This sense of community and mutual aid deeply influenced his view of the world, ingraining in him a lifelong commitment to helping others. As Alexander grew older, his desire for knowledge only intensified. He knew that opportunities in the small village were limited, and his dreams often took him far beyond the fields of Lockfield. His mother, recognizing his potential, made a pivotal decision that would open new doors for her son. With the little savings they had, she arranged for Alexander to move to London, to live with his older brother Thomas, and continue his education. The chapter of his life in rural Scotland closed, leaving behind a legacy of childhood memories rooted in nature, family, and community. These early experiences shaped Alexander Fleming into the man who would one day change the world, not through grandiose ambitions, but through a quiet dedication to understanding the mysteries of nature. As the train carried young Alexander towards the bustling city of London, his heart was both heavy and full of anticipation. He was leaving behind everything familiar, but ahead lay a world of possibilities, ready to be discovered. Chapter 2: Education Journey. As young Alexander Fleming waved goodbye to the rolling fields of Lockfield from the train that would take him to London, he carried with him not just his few belongings, but a burning curiosity and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. The rural landscapes faded into the distance, replaced by the sprawling, smoke-filled skyline of London. This city, buzzing with energy and opportunities, was to be his new home, a place where his dreams of further education would take shape. Arriving in London, Alexander moved in with his brother Thomas, who was already established as a doctor. The contrast between the quiet life of a Scottish farm and the bustling streets of London was overwhelming. Everywhere Alexander looked, there were people rushing about, carriages clattering over the cobblestones, and the constant hum of the city. It was a world away from Lockfield, but in this chaos, Alexander saw a ladder to his aspirations. His first challenge was to find a school that would prepare him for his future. With the help of his brother, he enrolled at the Regent Street Polytechnic. The institution was a hub for eager minds, offering courses that ranged from languages to sciences, all designed to prepare students for university or professional careers. For Alexander, the Polytechnic was a treasure trove of knowledge, its classrooms doorways to new worlds. At the Polytechnic, Alexander was an exceptional student. His teachers quickly noticed his meticulous attention to detail and his profound ability to absorb complex subjects. He studied a variety of topics, but it was the sciences that captivated him the most. Biology, chemistry, and physics became his favorite subjects. These were fields that satisfied his natural curiosity about how things worked, from the smallest microorganism to the vast laws of motion. Despite his academic success, life in London was not easy for Alexander. The city was expensive, and he had to live frugally, often skipping meals to save money for books. He also took on part-time jobs, working in shops and even at the docks, where he unloaded ships to earn extra money. This hard work was exhausting, but Alexander never complained. He knew that each sacrifice was a step toward his larger goal. The years at the Polytechnic were transformative. Alexander not only excelled in his studies, but also grew from a country boy into a confident young man, capable of navigating the complexities of city life. His resilience and determination were evident to all who met him. However, as he neared the end of his courses at the Polytechnic, Alexander knew that he wanted to go further, to study medicine. The decision to pursue a medical career came from his deep-seated desire to make a difference in the world. Medicine offered the chance to combine his love for science with his aspiration to help others. However, medical school was expensive, and gaining admission was highly competitive. Undeterred, Alexander spent months preparing for the entrance examinations. Nights that were once for rest were now spent poring over medical textbooks and practice papers. When the day of the examination finally arrived, Alexander felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. The test was grueling, covering a range of topics from anatomy to physiology. But when the results were posted weeks later, his name was among those who had passed. Alexander was going to be a medical student at St. Mary's Hospital Medical School, a reputable institution known for its rigorous training and distinguished faculty. Starting at St. Mary's was another turning point in Alexander's life. The hospital was a far cry from the classrooms of the Polytechnic. Here, education was not just about learning from books, but also about hands-on practical experience. Alexander attended lectures and worked in the labs, but he also walked the hospital wards, learning directly from patients and doctors. This practical experience was eye-opening. It connected the dots between theoretical knowledge and real-world application. As Alexander progressed through his medical education, his passion for discovery grew. The more he learned, the more he realized how much there was still to uncover. His days were long and demanding, filled with studies and hospital rounds. But Alexander was driven by a vision of contributing to the world of medicine, of finding solutions to diseases that plagued humanity. As his education journey in London continued, Alexander Fleming was no longer just a student of science. He was becoming a pioneer, preparing to delve into uncharted territories of medical science. His journey from a simple farm in Scotland to the halls of St. Mary's Hospital was not just a tale of personal ambition, but a testament to the power of education and perseverance. As he stood in the bustling corridors of St. Mary's S, ready to face the challenges of his final years of study, Alexander was on the brink of a future filled with discoveries that would change the world forever. Chapter 3. Discovering a Path in Medicine. Alexander Fleming's first day at St. Mary's Hospital Medical School marked the beginning of an extraordinary chapter in his life. The historic building, with its imposing architecture and bustling corridors filled with aspiring doctors, was a beacon of medical innovation in the heart of London. For Alexander, walking through these halls was not just a step towards fulfilling his dream. It was a plunge into a world where science and compassion met to heal. As a new student, Alexander was immediately struck by the intense atmosphere of the medical school. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the echoes of hurried footsteps. Students and doctors moved swiftly, their faces set with determination and focus. This was a place of serious purpose, where each day brought new challenges and learning opportunities. Alexander's early medical training was rigorous. His days began early and ended late, filled with lectures, laboratory work, and hands-on clinical practice. He learned anatomy, dissecting cadavers to understand the complex workings of the human body. In physiology, he studied the functions of various organs, fascinated by the mechanisms that kept the body alive. Biochemistry introduced him to the chemical processes that underpinned life itself. One of the most significant aspects of his training at St. Mary's was the time he spent on hospital wards. Here, Alexander saw the direct impact of disease on human life. He observed surgeries and participated in the care of patients with all manner of illnesses. These experiences were not only educational, but also deeply moving. Alexander was often touched by the vulnerability of patients and the trust they placed in their doctors. It strengthened his resolve to not only become a physician, but to be one who could make a real difference in his patients' lives. Alexander's interests during his medical training were broad, but he showed a particular fascination with the microscopic world of bacteria. The field of bacteriology was just blossoming, and new discoveries were being made that would change the face of medicine. Alexander spent many hours in the laboratory, peering through microscopes, studying the tiny organisms that could cause so much harm. It was in these early days at St. Mary's that Alexander began to form the ideas that would later guide his research. He was intrigued by the natural antibacterial substances found in the body and wondered if there might be ways to harness these to fight infections. This curiosity was fueled by the deaths he saw around him, many of which were caused by bacterial infections that had no effective treatment at the time. Alexander's professors noticed his keen interest and dedication. One professor in particular, Dr. Price, became a mentor to him. Dr. Price encouraged Alexander to ask questions and to think beyond the textbook. Medicine is as much about questioning as it is about knowing, Dr. Price would often say. This encouragement to think critically and creatively was a pivotal influence on Alexander's approach to science. In addition to his studies and time in the hospital, Alexander also participated in the school's laboratory research projects. These projects gave him valuable experience in scientific investigation and experiment design. He learned how to formulate hypotheses, conduct experiments, and analyze results. These skills were crucial in his later work, and the disciplined approach he developed during these projects was evident in all his scientific endeavors. As his medical training progressed, Alexander became known among his peers not only for his academic prowess, but also for his humility and kindness. Despite his growing knowledge and skills, he remained a quiet and thoughtful figure, always willing to help fellow students or listen to a patient's worries. His time at St. Mary's was not without its challenges, however. The workload was heavy and the expectations were high. The pressure to succeed was immense, but Alexander handled it with grace and determination. He was often exhausted, yet he found great satisfaction in his studies and the promise of being able to contribute meaningfully to the field of medicine. By the end of his time at St. Mary's, Alexander had not only mastered the fundamentals of medicine, but had also laid the groundwork for his future explorations. His experiences at the medical school had shaped him into a capable and compassionate physician, but more importantly, they had sparked a passion for discovery that would soon lead to one of the most significant medical breakthroughs in history. As he prepared to graduate, Alexander Fleming was on the cusp of a discovery that would forever change the way infections were treated. His path in medicine, though begun with uncertainty, was now clear and full of potential. Chapter 4. The War Years. As the world was thrust into the turmoil of World War I, Alexander Fleming found himself far from the lecture halls of St. Mary's Hospital Medical School. He was now Captain Fleming, serving in the Royal Army Medical Corps. The battlefield was a harsh teacher, but it was here, amidst the mud and the blood, that Fleming's path would take a pivotal turn towards his future discoveries. Alexander was stationed at a makeshift hospital near the front lines in France. The conditions were dire. The hospital was constantly filled with the wounded and the dying, and the medical staff worked tirelessly under constant threat of enemy fire. It was a world away from the controlled environment of the laboratory, and yet it was here that Alexander's keen observational skills would lead to a critical insight. As a medic, Alexander's days were consumed with treating gunshot wounds and infections. Antibiotics did not yet exist, and antiseptics were the only weapon against infection. However, Alexander quickly observed that the antiseptics used to clean wounds often did more harm than good. They killed bacteria, but they also damaged the body's own tissues and seemed to impede the natural healing processes. This observation was troubling to him, and it sparked a question that would linger in his mind. Was there a better way to treat infections that didn't harm the body's own cells? Amidst the chaos of war, Alexander witnessed countless cases of sepsis, infections that spread rapidly, often with fatal results. The standard treatments were inadequate, and many soldiers died not from their wounds, but from the infections that followed. Each death was a stark reminder of the limitations of current medical practices, and each fueled Alexander's resolve to find a solution. The battlefield also offered a unique environment to study wound infections. Alexander collected samples and carefully documented his cases. He noted how different types of wounds became infected and how the body responded. These observations were meticulous, filled with the detail and precision that would later characterize his laboratory work. During quieter moments, Alexander read medical journals that arrived from home. He followed the latest research and kept abreast of theories about antibacterial substances. It was during one of these reading sessions that he stumbled upon an article discussing the antibacterial properties of some mold strains. This information lodged itself in the back of his mind, a piece of the puzzle that he would return to later. Despite the horrors of war, Alexander's time as a medic was not without moments of humanity and camaraderie. He formed close bonds with his fellow medics and the soldiers they treated. These relationships were built on mutual respect and the shared experience of surviving in such extreme conditions. Alexander was known for his calm demeanor and his ability to comfort the injured men with a few reassuring words. As the war dragged on, the experience hardened Alexander, but also deepened his compassion and his dedication to medicine. He emerged from the war not just as a skilled physician, but as a man profoundly aware of the impact of disease and injury. The war had been a crucible, forging him into a determined researcher, eager to explore new ideas. When the armistice was declared in 1918 and the guns finally fell silent, Alexander returned to London. He was changed by the war, marked by what he had seen and learned. The questions about antibacterial treatment that had arisen on the battlefield now occupied his thoughts. He was determined to find answers. Returning to St. Mary's Hospital and his old laboratory, Alexander brought with him the insights and questions sparked by his wartime experiences. He was ready to delve deeper into the study of bacteria and infections. The next phase of his life would be devoted to this pursuit, and it was set against the backdrop of the post-war world, eager for the breakthroughs that would save lives in future conflicts. The war years had been a time of profound challenge and change for Alexander Fleming. They had also been years of growth, pushing him toward the discovery that would define his career. As he hung up his uniform and donned the laboratory coat once more, Alexander was not just resuming his old life. He was starting on a new quest, driven by the memories of the men whose lives he had fought to save. Chapter 5. Post-War Challenges. After the armistice, Alexander Fleming returned to a Britain vastly changed by the war. The country was healing from the scars of conflict, grappling with the losses, and trying to rebuild. For Fleming, resuming his position at St. Mary's Hospital meant confronting a new set of challenges in a society that was struggling to find its footing again. St. Mary's itself had transformed during the war, having served as a military hospital, treating thousands of returning soldiers. The hospital now transitioned back to civilian service, but the effects of the war lingered in its halls and in the patients it served. Resources were scarce, and the staff was stretched thin, yet the demand for medical care surged with soldiers and civilians alike needing treatment. For Alexander, returning to the familiar yet altered surroundings of St. Mary's was both comforting and disconcerting. He found his old laboratory somewhat neglected and in disarray. Equipment was outdated, supplies were low, and there was a backlog of research work. However, his wartime experiences had only deepened his resolve to advance medical science, particularly in finding better treatments for bacterial infections. The post-war years were a time of economic hardship for Britain. Funding for scientific research was limited as national funds were prioritized for rebuilding infrastructure and supporting the millions affected by the war. This meant that Alexander had to be resourceful, often improvising with the materials he had, and sometimes funding aspects of his work from his own pocket. Despite these difficulties, Alexander was determined to continue his research on antibacterial substances. He spent countless hours in his lab, studying various strains of bacteria and the substances that could potentially inhibit their growth. His focus was intense, driven by the memory of the soldiers he had treated, whose lives could have been saved with better treatments. In this challenging environment, Alexander's innovative spirit came to the fore. He experimented with different natural substances, including antiseptics used during the war, to see their effects on bacteria cultures. His meticulous work often stretched late into the night, a solitary figure against the backdrop of a dimly lit lab. His colleagues at St. Mary's noted his dedication. Though some were skeptical of the practical outcomes of his research, others were inspired by his commitment. Among them was Dr. Sarah Kinney, a young researcher who shared his interest in bacteriology. She became a close collaborator and confidant, assisting him in his experiments and discussing new research ideas. The slow pace of progress was frustrating at times. There were days when Alexander felt that every step forward was countered by 2 steps back. Failures were common, and successes were few and far between. However, each failure taught him something new, refining his hypotheses and sharpening his experimental techniques. Alexander's dedication to his research was not just about achieving scientific breakthroughs, it was also driven by a deep-seated desire to make a difference in the world. He saw the potential for his work to save lives and alleviate suffering. This vision kept him going through the toughest times, providing a beacon of hope, not just for himself, but also for his colleagues. One day, while examining a set of culture dishes, Alexander noticed something unusual. A mold had contaminated one of the dishes, and around this mold, the bacteria seemed to have been destroyed. This observation intrigued him greatly. It was a moment of serendipity, recalling his wartime reading about the antibacterial properties of some molds. This discovery sparked a new phase in his research. With renewed vigor, Alexander set out to isolate the mold and identify the substance it produced that was capable of killing bacteria. This work was meticulous and required great patience, but Alexander was no stranger to either. Through his perseverance, Alexander Fleming eventually succeeded in isolating the mold and later identified it as producing penicillin. This breakthrough would not have been possible without his unwavering dedication to medical research, even in the face of post-war challenges. As Britain continued to recover from the devastation of World War I, Alexander's work at St. Mary's quietly laid the foundation for one of the most important medical discoveries of the 20th century. His journey from the battlefields back to the laboratory was not just a return to normalcy, but a stepping stone to revolutionary change in the world of medicine. Chapter 6. The Accidental Discovery. It was the summer of 1928, and the city of London was bustling as usual, filled with the echoes of commerce and the relentless pace of life. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, however, a quiet revolution was about to unfold in a small, cluttered laboratory. This was where Alexander Fleming worked as a bacteriologist, surrounded by petri dishes, microscopes, and flasks, the tools that would soon lead to a discovery changing the course of medicine. The laboratory where Alexander spent his days was modest and somewhat disorganized. Shelves were stacked with scientific journals and notebooks, tables cluttered with bacterial cultures and glassware. It was in this unassuming setting that Alexander conducted his experiments, often working alone, meticulously recording every observation. On a particular day in September, Alexander returned from a 2-week vacation with his family. His mind was still in a relaxed state, the memories of sunny days spent away from the lab lingering in his thoughts. As he entered his laboratory, he was greeted by the familiar sight of disarray. Before his departure, he had stacked several petri dishes containing Staphylococcus bacteria cultures on a bench. These were experiments he had left in haste, intending to study the various antiseptics and their effects on bacteria. As he began to organize the cluttered bench, Alexander noticed something unusual in one of the dishes. A mold had grown in the dish, and around this mold there was a clear area where the bacteria seemed to have been completely eradicated. This sight was unexpected, a surprising contrast to the other dishes where bacteria thrived unabated. Intrigued, Alexander leaned closer, his eyes examining the mysterious mold. It was unlike anything he had intended to cultivate. The mold was an accidental intruder, likely having drifted in through a window or carried in on a draught of air. Yet its effect on the bacteria was profound. The area surrounding the mold was clear of any bacterial growth, suggesting that the mold was producing a substance lethal to the bacteria. Alexander's scientific curiosity was piqued. He immediately set about identifying the mold. It was a strain of Penicillium notatum, a common type of fungus, but its effect on bacteria was anything but common. Thinking back to his wartime observations about antiseptics harming human cells while trying to kill bacteria, Alexander wondered if he had stumbled upon a substance that could attack bacteria without such drawbacks. The following weeks were filled with intense study and experimentation. Alexander cultivated more of the Penicillium mold, carefully isolating it and testing its effects on different bacterial cultures. His findings were consistent. The mold consistently killed bacteria without harming the surrounding environment. Realizing the potential of his discovery, Alexander grew cautious yet excited. He documented every experiment in meticulous detail, aware of the significance these findings could hold. He called the substance produced by the mold penicillin, after the penicillium that produced it. Alexander knew he needed to share his discovery, but the path to recognition was not straightforward. He prepared a paper detailing his findings, which he submitted to the British Journal of Experimental Pathology. When the paper was published in 1929, it received little attention at first. The scientific community was skeptical, as the idea of a mold-killing bacteria seemed far-fetched to many. Undeterred, Alexander continued to study penicillin, trying to find ways to produce it in sufficient quantities for further testing. However, the task was daunting. The mold was capricious, not always producing penicillin reliably, and Alexander struggled with the technical aspects of mass production. Despite these challenges, Alexander's accidental discovery in his cluttered laboratory would eventually lead to one of the greatest breakthroughs in medical science. It would take several more years and the efforts of other scientists who recognized the potential of penicillin to bring it to the forefront of medical use. In that humble and disorganized space, Alexander Fleming's sharp eye and scientific acumen had turned a chance occurrence into a discovery that would save millions of lives. His story of the accidental discovery of penicillin remains one of the most celebrated moments in scientific history, a testament to the idea that sometimes the greatest discoveries are made not through intention, but through serendipity and keen observation. Chapter 7. Understanding Penicillin. After his unexpected discovery of penicillin, Alexander Fleming faced the monumental task of proving its potential to the scientific community. This chapter of his life was marked not only by intense research and experimentation, but also by the significant challenges of skepticism and the struggle for recognition. Alexander knew that if penicillin was to be accepted as a medical breakthrough, he would need rigorous scientific data to support his findings. The first step was to understand exactly how penicillin worked. He hypothesized that penicillin was not merely inhibiting the growth of bacteria, but was actually killing them. To prove this, he designed a series of experiments to observe the interaction between penicillin and bacteria under the microscope. Using glass slides and carefully prepared cultures of bacteria, Alexander applied tiny amounts of penicillin to the bacteria and watched the results. Under the microscope, he could see the bacteria beginning to disintegrate soon after coming into contact with penicillin. This was exciting. It confirmed his hypothesis about the bactericidal properties of penicillin. However, understanding the scope of penicillin's effectiveness was another challenge. Alexander tested penicillin against a variety of bacteria, including those causing sore throat, boils, and other infections. In each test, penicillin proved effective, killing the bacteria and clearing the infections in the cultures. These results were promising and offered a glimpse of penicillin's potential to treat a wide range of bacterial infections. Despite these positive results, the road to recognition was fraught with obstacles. When Alexander published his initial findings, the response from the scientific community was lukewarm at best. Many scientists were skeptical of the idea that a mold could produce a substance capable of killing bacteria effectively. This skepticism was partly due to the prevailing scientific norms, which favored synthetic chemicals over natural substances like mold. Moreover, there were technical challenges in producing penicillin in quantities sufficient for extensive testing. Penicillin was notoriously difficult to isolate and purify, and Alexander's laboratory at St. Mary's was ill-equipped for the kind of chemical engineering required. Despite his best efforts, he was only able to produce small amounts of penicillin, not enough to conduct clinical trials or long-term studies. Determined to validate his discovery, Alexander attempted to interest chemists and pharmaceutical companies in developing penicillin further. However, most were hesitant to invest time and resources into what seemed like an uncertain venture. Without the ability to produce penicillin on a larger scale, its practical application was limited. Faced with these challenges, Alexander continued his work, focusing on refining his methods of extracting and purifying penicillin. He collaborated with other researchers at St. Mary's, sharing his findings and seeking advice on overcoming the chemical hurdles. These collaborative efforts were vital, slowly advancing the understanding of how to work with penicillin. Despite the slow progress, Alexander never lost faith in the potential of penicillin. He often spoke at medical conferences and seminars, presenting his data and arguing for the importance of natural antibacterials. His persistence gradually began to pay off as a few scientists and doctors started to take interest in his work. One turning point came when a small number of researchers, intrigued by Alexander's persistent claims, began their own experiments with penicillin. These independent studies confirmed Alexander's findings about penicillin's effectiveness against bacteria, lending credibility to his initial observations. As more data accumulated, the scientific community began to recognize the significance of penicillin. The skepticism that had initially greeted Alexander's discovery started to wane, replaced by a cautious optimism. Researchers around the world began to consider the implications of an effective, naturally derived antibiotic, and the momentum for further development grew. Understanding penicillin was a slow and arduous journey, marked by skepticism and technical challenges. However, Alexander Fleming's unwavering dedication and belief in his discovery eventually led to a broader acceptance and understanding of penicillin's potential. This chapter of his life highlighted not only his scientific acumen, but also his perseverance in the face of doubt and discouragement, qualities that would eventually herald a new era in medical treatment. Chapter 8: Struggles and Setbacks. Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin in 1928 opened up a new frontier in the battle against bacterial infections. However, the path from discovery to practical application was fraught with challenges. One of the most daunting was producing penicillin in sufficient quantities to be truly effective in the medical field. After establishing the antibacterial properties of penicillin, Fleming was eager to see it used in hospitals and clinics. However, the process of extracting penicillin from the mold culture was inefficient and yielded only minute amounts. These small quantities were sufficient for laboratory experiments, but far from enough for the treatment of patients. Fleming's laboratory at St. Mary's was modest, equipped with basic tools that were inadequate for large-scale production. He tried various methods to increase the yield of penicillin, including altering the nutrients for the mold and modifying the fermentation process. Despite his efforts, the results were still disappointing. The inconsistency and low yield of penicillin extraction became a significant barrier to moving forward. As he struggled with these production issues, the scientific and medical communities showed a mix of skepticism and interest. While some were intrigued by the potential of penicillin, others doubted its practical value. The skepticism was partly due to previous claims of miracle substances that had failed to live up to their promise. Additionally, many scientists and doctors were accustomed to using sulfur drugs, the only other antibacterials available at the time, which were easier to produce and more consistently effective in the short term. Amidst these challenges, Fleming sought collaboration with chemists and pharmaceutical companies, hoping they could offer a solution to the production issues. However, most companies were hesitant to invest in a substance that was difficult to produce and not yet proven on a large scale. This lack of industrial interest was a major setback for Fleming, who saw the enormous potential of penicillin to save lives. Frustrated, but not defeated, Fleming continued to publish his findings, hoping to attract wider interest and support. He presented his research at scientific conferences and published papers detailing the antibacterial effects of penicillin. Slowly, as more researchers began to study penicillin, interest in its development started to grow. At the same time, Fleming's work in the lab continued. He experimented with different strains of Penicillium mold, searching for one that might produce penicillin more efficiently. This was a painstaking process, as each new strain had to be tested and its penicillin yield measured. The work was slow and often tedious, with many strains producing no better results than the original. The scientific community's reaction gradually shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism as more data on penicillin's effectiveness became available. Reports of successful treatments using penicillin in small-scale clinical trials began to circulate, fueling interest in overcoming the production challenges. The breakthrough in production techniques would ultimately come from researchers in the United States, where a team led by scientists at the Northern Regional Research Laboratory in Peoria, Illinois, developed a deep tank fermentation method that significantly increased the yield of penicillin. This advancement was crucial and came after Fleming's initial discovery. It highlighted the importance of collaboration across disciplines and borders in scientific research. Alexander Fleming's struggles with producing penicillin underscore the reality that significant scientific discoveries often face practical hurdles that require persistent effort and collaboration to overcome. Despite the initial setbacks and the slow pace of progress, Fleming's dedication to his discovery never wavered. His continued advocacy for penicillin played a vital role in ensuring that the substance eventually received the attention it deserved, leading to its development into the life-saving drug it is known as today. Chapter 9: World War II and Penicillin. As World War II engulfed the globe, the demand for effective medical treatments reached unprecedented levels. Infections in wounded soldiers often led to more deaths than the injuries themselves. It was during this dire time that penicillin, Alexander Fleming's remarkable discovery, finally received the attention and resources needed for its production to be scaled up. The early years of the war were grim, with many soldiers succumbing to bacterial infections that today's antibiotics could have easily cured. The potential of penicillin to save lives was clear, but the challenge remained: producing it in quantities large enough to make a difference on the battlefields. The breakthrough in mass production of penicillin came through a transatlantic collaboration. In the United States, scientists had taken up the task of finding a way to produce penicillin on a grand scale. They used a method called deep tank fermentation, which allowed the mold to grow in large vats, producing penicillin much more efficiently than the petri dishes used in Fleming's modest laboratory. The impact of these efforts was monumental. By 1943, just a few years into World War II, penicillin was being mass-produced. Factories in the United States were producing enough of the drug to meet the military's needs, and soon it was being shipped across the Atlantic to aid the Allied forces. Penicillin's arrival in the war zones was nothing short of revolutionary. Medical units were equipped with the new drug, and doctors soon saw dramatic improvements. Soldiers who once would have died from infected wounds were recovering. Penicillin was not only saving lives, but also enabling soldiers to return to the fight, which had significant strategic implications for the war effort. The story of how penicillin changed the course of infections during World War II is filled with individual tales of survival and recovery. One such story involved a young soldier named James, who was severely wounded during the Normandy landings. His wounds were infected, and in previous years, his prognosis would have been grim. However, thanks to penicillin, James's infection was brought under control, and he made a full recovery. Stories like James's were becoming common, illustrating the profound impact penicillin was having on the war effort and on individual lives. Doctors and nurses on the front lines marveled at the drug's effectiveness. They administered penicillin with a sense of awe and relief, knowing that they finally had a weapon against the infections that had plagued military hospitals. The use of penicillin also led to changes in medical protocols and practices. It became standard procedure to administer the drug to wounded soldiers as a preventative measure, significantly reducing the rates of infection and complication from injuries. The scaling up of penicillin production also had effects beyond the battlefields. Civilians suffering from bacterial infections, such as pneumonia and rheumatic fever, now had access to a powerful antibiotic. The public health impact was enormous, reducing mortality rates and improving the quality of life for millions. Penicillin's role in World War II extended beyond its immediate medical applications. It became a symbol of hope and innovation, an example of how scientific breakthroughs could be harnessed to solve real-world problems. For the Allied forces, penicillin was not just a medical tool, but a strategic asset, one that contributed to the overall victory. By the end of the war, penicillin had earned the nickname the miracle drug. Its development and mass production were hailed as major scientific and logistical achievements. The lessons learned in producing and distributing penicillin also paved the way for future advances in antibiotic research and production. Chapter 10: Recognition and Fame. As the Second World War drew to a close, the world was not only witnessing the dawn of peace, but also celebrating the triumph of medical science, particularly the miraculous effects of penicillin. The man behind this groundbreaking discovery, Alexander Fleming, found himself catapulted from the confines of his laboratory into the global spotlight. The transformation in Fleming's life began as reports of penicillin's success spread far and wide. Stories of soldiers' lives saved and infections cured were frequent headlines in newspapers, heralding penicillin as a wonder drug. It was during this time that Alexander Fleming's name became synonymous with one of the greatest medical advances of the 20th century. Recognition came swiftly. In 1944, Fleming was knighted by King George VI, becoming Sir Alexander Fleming. This honor was not just a personal accolade, but also a public acknowledgement of the profound impact his work had on millions of lives. The knighthood was a symbol of national appreciation, placing Fleming among the esteemed ranks of scientists who had served humanity with their discoveries. However, the pinnacle of Fleming's recognition came in 1945 when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. He shared the prize with Howard Florey and Ernst Boris Chain, who had been instrumental in developing the mass production techniques for penicillin. The Nobel Prize ceremony was a momentous occasion, attended by prominent figures from the scientific community and watched by the world. During his acceptance speech, Fleming humbly acknowledged the role of chance in his discovery and emphasized the collaborative effort required to bring penicillin to the public. The Nobel Prize elevated Fleming to an international status rarely achieved by scientists. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities around the world poured in, and he spent the following years traveling extensively, promoting the use of antibiotics and cautioning against their overuse. Fleming's message was clear. While antibiotics could save lives, their misuse could lead to resistance, a warning that remains prescient today. Awards and accolades continued to accumulate. Universities bestowed honorary degrees upon him. Scientific societies granted him memberships, and awards from various countries recognized his contributions to medicine and humanity. Each award was a testament to the global gratitude towards Fleming, whose work had opened a new era in the treatment of infectious diseases. Despite the fame and recognition, Fleming remained a modest man. Colleagues and friends noted that he did not change much despite his fame. He was still the diligent, somewhat reserved scientist who preferred his laboratory to the limelight. Fleming often remarked that the real heroes were the patients and doctors who fought diseases every day, and he was just fortunate to have provided them with a new tool. Back at St. Mary S., life for Fleming continued as usual. He returned to his research and his role as a professor, mentoring the next generation of microbiologists. His office, however, had become a mini museum, filled with gifts and letters from grateful patients and admirers. Among these were poignant reminders of the lives he had touched. A framed letter from a mother whose child's life was saved by penicillin, a photograph of a soldier who had recovered from a nearly fatal wound, and countless thank you notes from around the world. As the years passed, Fleming watched as antibiotics reshaped medicine. Penicillin and its derivatives became staples in hospitals, saving countless lives and fundamentally altering the outcomes of both common and severe infections. Fleming's discovery had not only earned him fame, but had genuinely transformed the world. In reflecting on his journey, Fleming acknowledged the role of serendipity in his discovery of penicillin, but also the importance of preparedness. His famous quote, "One sometimes finds what one is not looking for," became a mantra for scientific research, encapsulating the essence of discovery as a blend of chance and intent. Chapter 11. The Later Years. As the years progressed after the discovery of penicillin, Sir Alexander Fleming continued to dedicate himself to scientific research and personal pursuits that filled his life with quiet satisfaction and joy. The later years of his life were marked by a balanced blend of professional accolades and a rich personal life, reflecting the fullness of his character beyond his identity as a scientist. In the professional realm, Fleming remained active at St. Mary's Hospital and its associated research facilities. Although penicillin was his most famous discovery, his curiosity and passion for microbiology never waned. He continued to investigate other antibacterial substances, always with an eye toward improving the effectiveness and safety of antibiotics. His laboratory was a hub of activity where he mentored young scientists and researchers, imparting not only his vast knowledge, but also his philosophy of perseverance and meticulous observation. Fleming's approach to research was methodical and patient, traits that had led him to discover penicillin and continued to guide his later projects. He was particularly interested in the mechanisms of bacterial resistance, a problem he had foreseen as early as when penicillin was first used. His foresight in this area led to early discussions on how to use antibiotics responsibly, a conversation that remains critically relevant today. Outside the laboratory, Fleming enjoyed a fulfilling personal life. He was married to Sarah Marion McElroy, a trained nurse who was an understanding and supportive partner. Their home life was warm and welcoming, often filled with the laughter of family and friends. Fleming took great pleasure in being a father to his son Robert, from his first marriage to Sarah Fleming, who had sadly passed away many years earlier. He was an attentive and caring father, often seen sharing his love for nature and science with his son during walks in the countryside or experiments in their home laboratory. Fleming's role as a family man extended to his broader family and network of friends. He was known for his hospitality and enjoyed hosting dinners and gatherings. Despite his fame, those who knew him personally spoke of his humility and kindness, traits that endeared him to many. His home was a reflection of his life's work and passions, adorned with artifacts from his research, awards, and personal memorabilia that told the story of a life richly lived. In his community, Fleming was respected not only for his scientific achievements, but also for his personal integrity and contributions. He was active in local affairs, often contributing to discussions on public health and education. His belief in the power of science to improve lives extended beyond the laboratory and into his everyday interactions with neighbors and community members. As Fleming grew older, he remained active in the scientific community, attending conferences and seminars where he was often a guest of honor. His speeches continued to inspire new generations of scientists, emphasizing the importance of ethical considerations in medical research and the responsibility that comes with scientific discovery. Fleming's golden years were a period of reflection and recognition. He received numerous awards and honors that celebrated his lifetime of contributions to science and medicine. Each accolade was a testament to the enduring impact of his work. But for Fleming, the true reward was seeing the ongoing benefits of penicillin and other antibiotics, which continued to save millions of lives around the world. In these later years, Fleming's life came full circle. The young boy who once explored the natural world in the Scottish countryside had changed the course of modern medicine. His legacy was not only in his scientific achievements, but also in the way he lived his life, with curiosity, dedication, and a deep sense of responsibility to humanity. Sir Alexander Fleming passed away in 1955, leaving behind a legacy that transcended his own life. His story continued to inspire, and his discovery remained a cornerstone of medical treatment. In the quiet moments of reflection, those who knew him best remembered not just the scientist, but the man who had loved, taught, and lived with an unwavering commitment to improving the human condition. Chapter 12. A Legacy of Saving Lives. As the world moved forward from the shadows of World War II, the legacy of Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin began to unfold in profound and far-reaching ways. The global impact of this miraculous drug not only changed the course of medical history, but also brought hope and healing to countless individuals around the world. In the years following the war, the production of penicillin rapidly scaled up, thanks to advancements in fermentation technology. This increased supply made the drug more accessible and affordable, allowing it to reach all corners of the globe. Hospitals, clinics, and doctors now had a powerful tool to combat bacterial infections that had once been death sentences. One of the most dramatic impacts of penicillin was seen in the treatment of infections related to childbirth. Puerperal fever, which had claimed the lives of many women during and after childbirth, was now being effectively treated with penicillin. This significant reduction in maternal mortality rates transformed childbirth into a safer experience, sparing families the heartache of losing mothers during what should be a joyous time. The reach of penicillin also extended to the battlefields of Korea and later Vietnam, where it was used to treat wounded soldiers, saving thousands from death by infection. The stories of these soldiers, who returned home to their families because of a mold-derived medicine, added layers to Fleming's legacy, illustrating the personal and emotional impact of his discovery. Beyond the battlefields and maternity wards, penicillin had a dramatic effect on the general population. Cases of pneumonia, rheumatic fever, and scarlet fever, which had high mortality rates, saw significant declines. A young boy in a small town, for example, contracted pneumonia, a common yet deadly disease, especially in children. Under normal circumstances, the community might have braced for the worst. However, with the administration of penicillin, the boy's condition stabilized, and he recovered within a few days. This story, replicated in numerous homes around the world, underscored the everyday miracles brought about by Fleming's discovery. The impact of penicillin was not limited to treating infections. Its success inspired a wave of research into other antibiotics, opening a new era in pharmaceutical development. Researchers, motivated by the success of penicillin, discovered other antibiotic families, which would go on to treat a wide range of bacterial infections and further reduce mortality rates worldwide. Public health campaigns often highlighted the stories of individuals saved by penicillin. One such story involved a young woman in Asia who contracted a severe bacterial infection while traveling. With her condition deteriorating rapidly, local doctors administered penicillin, a treatment they would not have had access to a decade earlier. The drug's effectiveness in halting the spread of the infection was a testament to the global reach of Fleming's legacy. As penicillin became a staple in medical treatments, it also brought about changes in public health policies. Governments and health organizations, recognizing the importance of antibiotics, began to invest more heavily in healthcare infrastructure, ensuring that life-saving drugs like penicillin were available to even the most remote and impoverished communities. The legacy of penicillin also highlighted the importance of scientific research and its potential to solve global challenges. Fleming's story became a beacon for aspiring scientists, demonstrating how curiosity-driven research could lead to discoveries that change the world. As the decades passed, the name Alexander Fleming became emblematic, not just of scientific achievement, but of hope, perseverance, and the shared quest for a better future. His legacy was not only in the lives saved, but in the millions more improved by the assurance of a cure for once deadly infections. Chapter 13. Contributions Beyond Penicillin. While penicillin remains Sir Alexander Fleming's most celebrated discovery, his contributions to science and medicine extend far beyond this singular achievement. Fleming's work in the fields of bacteriology, immunology, and chemotherapy has left an indelible mark on medical research, influencing generations of scientists and changing the way we understand and treat disease. Before the advent of penicillin, Fleming had already established himself as a skilled researcher. One of his early significant contributions was the discovery of lysozyme, an enzyme with mild antibacterial properties found in bodily fluids such as tears, saliva, and mucus. This discovery, though less renowned than penicillin, was critical in advancing the understanding of the body's innate defenses against microbial infections. Fleming's work on lysozyme paved the way for further research into the immune system, highlighting the potential for natural substances to combat bacterial pathogens. In his ongoing exploration of antimicrobial agents, Fleming also conducted extensive studies on antiseptics and their use in surgery and wound care. His observations during World War I, noting the often detrimental effects of antiseptic agents on the body's healing tissues, fueled his skepticism about their widespread use. These studies contributed to a shift in medical practice, moving away from harsh chemical antiseptics towards more benign substances that supported the body's natural healing processes. Fleming's insights into bacterial action and resistance also had a profound impact on the field of microbiology. He was among the first to warn about the potential for bacteria to develop resistance to antibiotics. His foresight in this area was visionary, as antibiotic resistance has become a major challenge in contemporary medicine. Fleming advocated for the prudent use of antibiotics, a principle that remains a cornerstone of antibiotic stewardship programs today. Beyond his laboratory work, Fleming's influence extended into the broader scientific community through his involvement with various scientific organizations and as a mentor to young researchers. He was a member of numerous prestigious societies, where he often spoke about the need for ongoing research into infectious diseases and the potential for new drug discoveries. Fleming's role as a mentor was perhaps one of his most enduring contributions. He nurtured the careers of many young scientists, instilling in them a rigorous scientific method and an ethical approach to research. His guidance helped shape the careers of future leaders in science and medicine, ensuring that his legacy would extend far beyond his own discoveries. His influence also reached the public and governmental levels. Fleming's advocacy for increased research funding helped to establish stronger support for scientific exploration in post-war Britain. His high-profile presence in the media and frequent public lectures raised awareness about the importance of medical research and its impact on public health. Moreover, Fleming's work inspired a wave of pharmaceutical innovation, encouraging the search for new antibiotics and therapeutic agents. The success of penicillin opened the door to the golden age of antibiotic discovery in the mid-20th century, leading to the development of a myriad of drugs that have saved countless lives. In medical research, Fleming's legacy is seen in the ongoing exploration of natural products as sources of new drugs. Researchers continue to mine nature's diversity, much like Fleming did with his mold cultures, to find novel treatments for diseases that continue to plague humanity. Chapter 14. Reflections on a Scientist's Life. As we delve deeper into the life and legacy of Sir Alexander Fleming, it becomes essential to reflect on the personal characteristics and philosophical beliefs that shaped his journey as a scientist. His story is not just one of groundbreaking discoveries, but also of the virtues and traits that propelled him to success and left a lasting impact on the world. Alexander Fleming was known for his humility, a trait that perhaps defined him more than any other. Despite the monumental success of penicillin, he often downplayed his role in its development, emphasizing the contributions of others and the serendipitous nature of his discovery. This humility extended beyond mere modesty. It was a reflection of his belief that science was a collaborative and cumulative endeavor, requiring the input and effort of many. Curiosity was another fundamental trait that drove Fleming throughout his life. From his early days exploring the natural world in the Scottish countryside to his meticulous experiments in the laboratory, his desire to understand and explore was evident. This innate curiosity was coupled with an exceptional capacity for observation. Fleming's ability to notice and make sense of small details that others might overlook. It was this trait that led to his discovery of both lysozyme and penicillin, each a result of observing ordinary phenomena with an extraordinary level of attentiveness. Fleming's approach to science was characterized by perseverance and resilience. The road to his discoveries was not straightforward. It was filled with setbacks and challenges. However, Fleming's persistence in the face of adversity and his unwavering dedication to his work allowed him to push forward even when the prospects seemed dim. His resilience is a testament to his philosophy that every failure is a step toward success, a chance to learn and improve. Another critical aspect of Fleming's character was his integrity. He was a scientist who operated with a strong sense of ethics, always mindful of the implications of his work. When penicillin became a recognized treatment, Fleming was quick to caution against its overuse, foreseeing the potential for bacterial resistance. His foresight and ethical concerns speak volumes about his commitment not just to scientific progress, but to the welfare of humanity. Fleming's success can also be attributed to his simplicity and pragmatism. He believed in simple solutions, often favoring straightforward experimental approaches that others might dismiss. This simplicity was rooted in his practical background and early medical training, which taught him the value of clear, direct methods in both research and treatment. Collaboration was a cornerstone of Fleming's philosophy. He valued the contributions of his colleagues and often collaborated with other scientists to further his research. This collaborative spirit was crucial in the eventual mass production and widespread use of penicillin, which required the expertise and effort of chemists, pharmacologists, and many others. Fleming's life and work were guided by a deep sense of duty to his field, to his colleagues, and to the broader community. This sense of duty was reflected in his commitment to teaching and mentoring young scientists, ensuring that his knowledge and values were passed on to future generations. In reflecting on the life of Alexander Fleming, it becomes clear that his scientific achievements were as much a product of his character and philosophy as of his intellectual prowess. His story is a compelling narrative of how personal virtues can intersect with professional pursuits to yield results that resonate well beyond the confines of a laboratory. Chapter 15. The Man Behind the Microscope. Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin and a Nobel laureate, was a figure of monumental scientific achievement. However, behind his global renown and scientific accolades, there was a man of simple pleasures, engaging hobbies, and a deep connection to his community. This chapter delves into the personal anecdotes and lesser-known aspects of Fleming's life, painting a portrait of the man behind the microscope. Fleming was born and raised in the rural Scottish countryside, a setting that instilled in him a lifelong appreciation for nature. This early exposure to the natural world sparked his curiosity about how things worked, a trait that would later define his scientific career. However, it also gave him a respite from the lab, where he often returned to recharge and reflect, indulging in bird-watching and long walks through the Scottish landscapes. A lesser-known aspect of Fleming's personality was his artistic flair. He was an accomplished painter, a hobby he pursued in his spare time. Fleming's artistic side was not just limited to traditional painting. He also engaged in an unusual art form known as germ art. Using different species of live bacteria, he would carefully culture them in petri dishes to create vibrant patterns and images, which sometimes resembled intricate paintings. This unique blend of science and art was a testament to Fleming's creativity and his ability to find beauty and intrigue in the microscopic world. Fleming's home life was filled with warmth and hospitality. He loved hosting dinners and gatherings for friends and colleagues. Those who knew him personally spoke of his wit and the engaging stories he shared about his research and travels. These gatherings often included lively discussions about science, art, and politics, reflecting Fleming's wide range of interests beyond his scientific pursuits. In his local community, Fleming was highly respected not just for his scientific accomplishments, but also for his personal integrity and generosity. He was known to provide free medical advice and assistance to his neighbors and local residents, often helping those who were less fortunate or in need of medical attention. His contributions to the community extended to local schools, where he occasionally gave talks about science and medicine, inspiring young minds to explore the wonders of biology and chemistry. Fleming also had a passion for history, particularly medical history. He collected antique medical books and instruments, amassing a significant collection over the years. These items were more than just collectibles. They were a link to the past that he revered and continuously sought to learn from. This passion for history was reflected in his own work, where he often cited historical approaches to medicine in his research and writings. Another lesser-known fact about Fleming was his involvement in various clubs and societies that had little to do with his scientific career. He was an active member of the Chelsea Arts Club and the Savage Club, where he enjoyed socializing with artists, writers, and performers. These interactions with individuals from various creative backgrounds enriched his personal life and provided a counterbalance to his scientific work. Despite his fame, Fleming remained grounded and approachable. He was known for his approachability and his willingness to engage with anyone interested in science, regardless of their background or education. This openness made him a beloved figure, not only among his peers in the scientific community, but also among the public. Through these personal anecdotes and lesser-known facts, a fuller picture of Alexander Fleming emerges. Beyond the accolades and the monumental discovery of penicillin, he was a man of diverse interests and deep humanity. His contributions to his community and his personal interests paint a picture of a man who was not only a great scientist, but also a committed community member, a creative artist, and a loving family man. Chapter 16. Fleming's Enduring Influence. As we reflect on the life and legacy of Sir Alexander Fleming, it is clear that his influence extends far beyond the walls of any laboratory or the pages of a scientific journal. His discovery of penicillin fundamentally changed the course of modern medicine, setting a precedent for antibiotic research and the treatment of bacterial infections that continues to resonate today. Fleming's work on penicillin in the mid-20th century ushered in the antibiotic era, a time when it became possible to treat bacterial infections effectively and save countless lives. The impact of this discovery cannot be overstated. It revolutionized medical practice, enabling surgeries, organ transplants, and treatments for previously incurable diseases without the looming risk of fatal infections. However, the significance of Fleming's contributions is not confined to his past achievements. His influence is profoundly felt in the ongoing battle against bacterial infections. Today, antibiotics derived from penicillin are still widely used, although the medical community now faces new challenges, such as antibiotic resistance. Fleming himself had foreseen this issue, warning that the misuse of antibiotics could lead to bacteria developing resistance to these life-saving drugs. His foresight highlights the continued relevance of his discoveries and the principles he advocated in antibiotic use. Fleming's legacy also includes his methodological approach to scientific research. His career exemplified the importance of observation, experimentation, and the willingness to pursue unexpected results. A mold growing accidentally in a petri dish led to one of the most important medical breakthroughs. This approach has inspired generations of scientists to maintain an open mind and recognize the potential in serendipitous findings. The educational impact of Fleming's work is another facet of his enduring legacy. His story is a staple in medical and scientific curricula around the world, serving as a classic example of how perseverance and curiosity can lead to monumental discoveries. Fleming's life and work continue to inspire students and researchers, driving home the message that science is a dynamic field shaped by both intention and chance. Moreover, Fleming's contributions to the field of microbiology and immunology continue to influence new areas of research, including the study of natural antimicrobials and the search for new antibiotics from other natural sources. The principles he used to extract and test penicillin are foundational in these endeavors. His work also underscores the critical need for global health strategies that safeguard the effectiveness of antibiotics through responsible use and innovative medical practices. As resistance to antibiotics grows, the medical community is increasingly drawn to Fleming's warnings, viewing them as a call to action to develop new drugs and treatment strategies. In the public realm, Alexander Fleming is often celebrated as a hero in medical history, a symbol of how individual contributions can have a global impact. His story is regularly featured in media and popular culture, reinforcing his role as an icon in science and medicine. This public recognition also helps raise awareness about the importance of scientific research and the ongoing challenges in public health. Fleming's influence is not confined to the past. It is a living, evolving legacy that continues to affect modern medicine and public health policy. His life's work provides a foundation upon which current and future generations of scientists build as they tackle the complex health challenges of the 21st century. Chapter 17. Final Thoughts and Conclusion. As we reach the conclusion of our exploration into the life and legacy of Sir Alexander Fleming, we reflect on a journey marked by profound discoveries, steadfast dedication, and an enduring impact on the world of medicine and beyond. Fleming's life story is not just a chronicle of scientific achievement, it is a narrative that intertwines the simplicity of curiosity with the complexity of major medical advancements. Alexander Fleming's humble beginnings in rural Scotland set the stage for a life characterized by curiosity and a keen observation of the natural world. These traits, fostered in the quiet landscapes of his youth, propelled him through an illustrious career, culminating in the groundbreaking discovery of penicillin. This discovery was not the result of a momentary stroke of genius, but the outcome of persistent work and a readiness to pursue unexpected leads, qualities that defined Fleming's approach to science. Fleming's work on penicillin revolutionized the field of medicine by introducing the world to the age of antibiotics. Before penicillin, common bacterial infections often had fatal outcomes, and surgeries were fraught with the risk of post-operative infection. Penicillin changed all that, dramatically reducing death rates from bacterial infections and making medical procedures far safer. This singular achievement earned Fleming a Nobel Prize in Medicine, shared with his colleagues Howard Florey and Ernst Boris Chain, who were instrumental in developing penicillin for mass use. However, Fleming's contributions extend beyond penicillin. His research into the enzyme lysozyme, his insightful observations on bacterial action and resistance, and his advocacy for cautious antibiotic use were ahead of their time. Today, as the medical community grapples with antibiotic resistance, Fleming's warnings about the misuse of antibiotics resonate more powerfully than ever, underscoring his role as a visionary in medical science. Fleming's life also exemplifies the role of serendipity in scientific discovery. His accidental discovery of penicillin reminds us that great advances often come unexpectedly, breaking the mold of structured experimentation. This aspect of his story is particularly inspiring for students and researchers, encouraging them to remain open to the unexpected and to recognize the potential in every accident or failure. Beyond his scientific endeavors, Fleming was a man of great character and integrity. His modesty, despite his fame and achievements, his generosity towards colleagues and students, and his deep commitment to the scientific community and public health are hallmarks of his personality. These traits not only made him a revered figure in his lifetime, but continue to endear him to those who study his life and work. As we consider his role as a hero in medical history, it is clear that Fleming's legacy is not confined to his discoveries alone. It is also reflected in the ongoing influence of his work on modern medicine and public health policies. His life story is a beacon for ethical scientific practice and a testament to the impact one dedicated individual can have on the health and well-being of humanity.